Hey, it's Jake here. Welcome to How to Fix Your Art, where you send us broken art, we fix it. Today, we're looking at Lee's fixing of Anita Okoye's piece. She made an excellent illustration, and the reason Lee picked this piece for us to fix, and be sure to watch my video as well, because we both do the same. We both fix the same piece, but we go about it in different ways. The reason he picked this is because this piece is like 90% there, and we wanted to talk about how do you make it that last 10%. How do you make it so it like really sings and it's something eye-catching, stops people. Attention is so scattered today by people, so your art actually has to like grab people's attention. How do you do that? And he focuses more on narrative for this piece, so check it out, learn from him, and then meet me after here for the outro.
I do want to say real quick before we get into that, I don't, can you see my palettes on here, Jake? Can you see this navigator that I'm moving around? My one pro tip that we haven't talked too much about, I don't know if Jake uses this or not, is this navigator button. It's located under your navigator right there. And it brings up this little bitty window. So I have two monitors. Most of you guys probably work on multiple monitors, but even if you don't, this is valuable, because how I use the navigator when I'm doing work is I put it on a separate screen or up in the corner of my screen, and I just keep it up. And like, no matter how close I zoom in to the actual document, notice how my navigator window stays the same. So the problem with digital art is you can get in real close, start adjusting things, and then you actually are detracting from the whole. So I keep this navigator window up to make sure the changes I'm making when I'm zoomed in look good when I'm zoomed out. So just a little pro tip. Do you use the navigator window?
I don't use the navigator, but I always open up the art in a second window. Did you know you can do that, right?
Yeah.
So this might be easier because it would save me from having to open the art in an extra window, just having the navigator.
Well, the cool thing about the navigator window too is you can grab, I mean, it does control your zoom. So you can, just grab onto it and do that too. So sometimes there's a zoom, like if you're using the Command Plus, it'll go in too far or it'll zoom back too far if you're doing Command Plus or Command Minus. And this one, you can set exactly how close you want to get. So just some navigator window tips. So let's back up. So this, like I said, this is the art that we're going to look at. I want to talk about the positives first. I love working on art that's about this level. I mean, everybody's at different levels, and everybody, no matter who you are, can have their art improved. So it's not just for beginning students. I mean, it's for me and Jake and Will too. We send each other images all the time, and we say, "Hey, what do you guys think? Oh, this looks weird. This looks funny. Change this color. All that kind of stuff." So it doesn't stop. I picked this image because I really like it. I think the paint quality is absolutely gorgeous. It almost reminds me of like a Miyazaki kind of background or something like that, like with this really, really beautiful kind of broken color that's happening. A lot of these gorgeous little details, and I love these kind of scenes anyway. So I just want to give some props, I guess, right from the beginning, that I think it's amazing what this artist did already. But, let's start off with our checklist. And this is sort of the order that it goes in. If you open the book and if you open the checklist, kind of goes through each thing. And I picked out one thing from each thing from each category that I thought could be a little bit more interesting. All right. So concept, emotional engagement. So one thing we've been doing here at SVS the past couple of months, thankful to Will Terry, who actually came up with this super simple idea, is just stating what's happening in the scene. And it's a great way to engage, to see if it's an engaging kind of thing. So what's happening in the scene? If you're going to describe this scene to somebody who's not looking at the picture, there's a girl mailing a letter. And there's a dog also. She brought her dog. So is that enough? I mean, this, like I said, the paint quality is great. So, if you can have simple concepts, but if you have a really simple concept that actually doesn't have too much concept, you got to really nail it on the art elements, meaning texture and lighting and all this, like basically really ramping up the art stuff. Now the paint quality is here, but there's not enough to separate this image from the fray. I think if somebody was just looking at it, they'd think, okay, cool, a girl's mailing a letter. Now, if you're doing sequential storytelling, there's these images that come up all the time in a book that are not your award-winning scenes. It's like, yeah, she mailed this letter, and then what happened next? And then that'll be the scene that's actually interesting, whatever, wherever this letter's going. But right now, this would just be what I call a segue image, not enough by itself. So there's not enough emotional engagement to me at this point. Okay, focal point and design. I do like that she is, let me switch to my brush. Hold on one second. There we go. All right, so she is off center, which is pretty nice, but in terms of a focal point and overall design, it leaves a little bit to be desired. For one thing, I'm going to combine this with silhouette too, but our main character basically is trapped in this little shape. She doesn't really stand out from the shape, especially if I back out, kind of blends into the overall shape where you might not even know up on first glance if there's a character even there. The other problem with the composition, in my opinion, is we've got basically half and half, 0.5 there, 0.5 here. And this part up here is a little bit distracting. There's some really nice detail. If you notice, this up here is the most contrast, and it's really well drawn, like all these little interesting details. So I tend to look up there, pay attention to that. There's a big void right here. So this top half is not really working for the concept. So our idea at SVS now is all this needs to support this. It's a really simple idea. How's your lighting supporting your concept? How's your composition supporting your concept? If you think of each one of these basic art elements as supporting the concept, you can sort of start to see when it's working and when it's not. In terms of value and lighting, that's the problem with this area right here, is that it's all sort of this middle ground, even though we do have this nice saturated red mailbox, which I think is a great choice. The values are all sort of the same on our character, a little bit darker dress, but not enough to separate it. So we're losing it with the focal point. I'm just kind of bouncing around here, but composition, you have your elements within the piece. Then there's also these implied lines, something we call leading lines. If you haven't heard of that, it's anything that sort of points to a character or away from a character. And sight lines are a huge driver to where people look. If you go outside and there's like 10 people on the street and they're all looking up and pointing, you're going to look up and see what's going on, right? You have to, it's just human nature. So you look where other people look, or you look where anything's like. You turn and see a dog looking a certain way, you'll probably turn and see what the dog's looking at, because it could be something that's going to eat you. So right now, there's a lot of focal point stuff that's taking away from our subject matter, which is really the mailing of this letter. There's some anatomy issues, just basic drawing stuff. Jake has a really great section on that in the book. But, for how nicely painted all this stuff is, like, I think the sign and the roof is better painted than the hand. So you got to really nail, again, you'll see how many times I wrote focal point up here. Those are the things you're focusing on. Like, you can basically leave off detail away from the focal point. You can leave off drawing ability away from the focal point. All that stuff you can leave off. But once you get down into where you want people to look, that's when you got to slow down and do the nice drawing. Okay, so
I follow up with that? I was watching
please.
An artist talking about faces and drawing, and they brought up a good point, and it's something that I have neglected from time to time, and that is, half the time you should be working, or maybe even 60-70% of the time, you should be focused on dialing in that focal point, even if it's just a face, and getting that face just right. And then the rest of it, 40-30% of the time, is spent on everything else.
Right.
And sometimes I think, well, it's just the face, I'll give it just as much time as I give everything else, and that's why my faces aren't any good in all my drawings. So
right. Yeah, you really, like, basically, if I drew this circle, I know I got a lot of stuff going on here. Let me clear all that. Actually, if I got this circle right here, that's what's important inside basically that circle, maybe even smaller, maybe like that. And once you get over here, like, do I need to really dial in this gutter? Probably not as much. Depending on your style, you can play with that more or less. But people who are good at directing their focal point really are better storytellers than if you're just painting like, okay, I got my concept. Now I'm just going to paint from corner to corner, the same quality all the way around. It's not so good. I see some stuff in the comments, Jake, saying the guidebook and all the stuff, the checklists and the videos and stuff is free with an annual subscription. It's going to be available a la carte otherwise. And so even if you're not a subscriber, you are going to be able to get this list if you want it. Okay, so I wish I could do an organized walkthrough of my layers, but I started with this stuff. And then I just started painting with, because, you know, a lot of times there's a million ways to solve these issues. And so I don't want you guys to think that the way that I'm going to show you is the way to solve these issues. It's just one way. And I didn't do it with an organized thing. Okay, I'm going to solve the gesture first and this and this. I just started painting and just saying, these are the problems that I need to solve. And so my solution is sort of the way that I would solve the problem. And I don't have an elegant way to walk through it. But here's my solutions. So starting off with the
you weren't kidding.
So starting off with it's a messy layer stack because I'm just like messing around. But you know, the first thing is the concept, and I need to get the viewer to be able to see that something is happening with this mailbox and separate her from the mailbox. So now I need to move the mailbox to the side so I can get a clear read on that silhouette. So that's the most important thing, is like now I have a side view of her. I've got a cheated view. If you guys know what cheated view is, like if this was really in perspective, it would be turned a little more, but you can always kind of rotate things a little bit more towards camera. They do that in movies and they do that in TV, and you know, it's called just cheating. You don't have to always stick with a perspective. I kind of turned it a little bit more to face us based on the perspective in here, but I really needed a silhouette view because I really needed this moment to happen in silhouette first. And so that's like my main thing, is getting the silhouette of what's happened, what the girl's doing. The second thing is I need some kind of concept here. So right now, I mean, she could be mailing a utility bill, like she's mailing in her gas bill. Not very interesting, right? And so, you know, you'd have to really come up with what is going to be that concept. But I thought, you know, what if she's carrying a picture of her grandma? Maybe her grandma passed away, and maybe this is a magic mailbox that she's going to somehow get a reply back to from her grandmother. So, you know, it's just, again, there's a million ways to start to come up with what is this person mailing and why is she mailing it and who's she mailing it to? I just came up with that just off the top of my head, but I just gave her a reason to mail it. And then I gave her a history. So if she's holding a picture that somebody in her family, you know, the viewer may not even know that, but you'll know that there's some reason she's holding that picture and mailing the letter. Hopefully there'll be some kind of connection there. So give her a reason to mail it. And then I thought, you know, you started to go, or this artist started to kind of have this sort of ramshackle details and stuff around. I saw this one plant here, but I thought, well, there's our way to get some life into this. Cause right now, this one to me feels a little bit stagnant. It feels lonely. And I still think you can have this sort of lonely feel, quiet kind of feel, but I just started ramping up like a little bit of the foliage because I was thinking like maybe this is an overgrown old, again, I started thinking like a Miyazaki film or something like that. You come across this like old kind of deserted town, you find this mailbox and somehow you're able to correspond with somebody that's gone, that's not around anymore. And I thought that was just a cool thing. So I started giving it a history. I give it a past with the picture. I give it a future with the mailing of the letter. And then now the audience has to do that work. The dog right now is passive in this one. The dog's not part of the scene per se, but again, the sight line, where's he looking? He's looking straight at the letter. Even up top, like I needed to activate this space. So I brought down basic graphic design elements coming down into the scene by bringing some of this stuff down here. And then I added, it looks like a rubber ducky. I don't even know what that is, a bird. He's also looking at the letter. Always trying to reinforce my focal point and build on that focal point. You know, just as I work, I was just copying things or whatever. And I just wondered if maybe there's even a better scene by cropping in like this. I love having, here, let me zoom in a little bit. I love having the dog almost like an unexpected cropping of the dog over here. So it doesn't look so formally composed. Almost looks like a snapshot in a weird way if we zoom in like that. I really like that. I also want to talk a little bit about a compositional element that I use quite a bit. I'm going to switch colors because it's hard to see. I do this thing, and I don't know if anybody else does this. I've never seen it anywhere, but basically if you draw from corner to corner, and then if you make a 90-degree line off of the other corners, it's a really wonderful place to put focal points. And so that's sort of my general idea. Most of the time that'll sort of give you that even rule of thirds. But as you start to get really a lot wider, you start to get this really, in my opinion, interesting layout, which I did.
I've never seen that before. That's cool.
It's nice, especially if you got like a skateboard or something, like a really wide layout. It puts your focal point way over here to the sort of to the side. And I like it a little bit better than like if this long format you're using rule of thirds, the boat would be here. Not that it makes a ton of difference, but I just find it to be a little more satisfying. But I always pay attention to where that shape is going, even if I don't end up totally using it. So that's my solutions. We know we gave it a little bit of pass too with the overgrowth of stuff. We know that this thing's been sitting. So we get a little bit of history of the place too. So that's sort of my solution, is to kind of invite a future, invite a past, and then decorate your scene with that stuff. And it'll become more engaging, in my opinion. And then lastly, just using just basic graphic design elements like these little wires and stuff. They may not seem like much, but they really are great. Like anytime I can use if I'm having trouble keeping my focus going down to my focal point, I will add curtains or some kind of like a branch or some leaves or whatever to try to keep that emphasis from drawing too much attention up here and staying down here. So that's kind of why I did those little wires and stuff. So I know it doesn't look intentional, but all that stuff is basically me saying, I need you to look down here because that's where the action is. Any questions,
really
Jake?
Cool. That's really cool. I think we're going to have to figure out a different way to do how to fix your art, because you just stole my entire lecture. Sorry. All right. That was Lee's approach. I really like where he went with that, about the idea of changing the position of the character so you could see the face. That's really important if you want to tell stories with your artwork. My approach was a little bit different. I focused more on less on narrative and more on making a decorative piece of art. So be sure to watch mine. If you want to get access to the digital guidebook for how to fix your art, including the checklist that shows all of the different things you can do, hold up your artwork next to that checklist and go through and see how to fix it. That's available to SVS Learn annual subscribers. It's just a freebie that comes with a subscription. If you're not an annual subscriber, either sign up for the annual, or we have it available as an a la carte purchase that you can do on its own, and the link to that is available in the description. Lastly, join us next third Thursday for the live stream. You don't want to miss the live streams because we answer questions live. It's kind of a chill environment where we're learning. Everybody's conversing in the chat and whatnot. It's a good time. Love to see you there. I think that's it. In the meantime, go draw something.